My name is Sophia, and I'm 25 years old. I once had everything I'd worked for my entire life, a full ride scholarship to Yale, my dream school. Then my parents forced me to give it all up for my brother's education. I thought that sacrifice was enough, but years later they demanded $500,000 more from me. What happened next completely transformed my life and my understanding of family. If you've ever had your dreams crushed by the people who should support you most, you'll understand. Before I begin my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if family financial betrayals resonate with you. I grew up in a middle-class suburb in Connecticut, where appearances meant everything. Our house wasn't the biggest on the block, but my parents made sure it was always perfectly maintained. My mother coordinated our outfits for family photos, and my father networked obsessively at community events. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. My brother Thomas came along when I was 4. From the moment he arrived, there was a subtle shift in our family dynamic. While I was expected to be responsible, Thomas was allowed to be carefree. When he broke things, it was, boys will be boys. When I made the smallest mistake, I was reminded of how I should know better. Despite this, I thrived academically. I was the kid with straight A's, the one teachers used as an example. By high school, I was taking every AP class available, staying up until 2 a.m. to maintain my perfect GPA. I graduated as valedictorian with my speech focusing on perseverance and dedication. My parents sat in the front row applauding politely, but saving their standing ovation for when Thomas won a soccer trophy the following week. The highlight of my academic career came when I received a full scholarship to Yale. I still remember the moment I opened that email sitting alone in my bedroom, tears streaming down my face. Yale had been my dream since I was 12 and visited the campus on a school trip. The Gothic architecture, the history, the prestige. I fell in love with all of it and promised myself I would study there someday. When I told my parents about the scholarship, they finally seemed genuinely proud of me. My father even bragged to his colleagues about having a Yale student in the family. For once, I was the golden child, and it felt amazing to have their approval. They threw me a small graduation party, inviting extended family and friends to celebrate. I overheard my mother telling her sister, "And the best part is, it won't cost us a penny." Meanwhile, Thomas was finishing his junior year of high school with decent but not exceptional grades. He was popular and athletic, but showed little interest in academics. Nevertheless, my parents hired expensive tutors and college consultants for him, convinced he would get into an Ivy League school too. My first year at Yale was everything I had dreamed of, and more. I made friends with brilliant people from around the world, took fascinating classes with renowned professors, and joined several clubs. I double majored in economics and computer science, already planning for a career in financial technology. I secured an internship for the following summer at a prestigious firm in New York City. Everything was falling into place. During holiday breaks, I noticed tension at home. My father seemed stressed, taking private phone calls and working late. My mother was cutting back on household expenses, something she'd never done before. When I asked if everything was okay, they assured me it was just adult stuff, and changed the subject to Thomas's college applications. Little did I know that these were the warning signs of the devastation that was about to upend my life. The summer after my freshman year started normally enough. I returned home excited to share stories about Yale and looking forward to my internship. But 3 days after I arrived, my parents called a family meeting in our living room. The serious looks on their faces made my stomach twist with anxiety. "Sophia," my father began, his voice unusually formal, "we need to discuss something important with you." He explained that his business had been struggling for the past 2 years. The economic downturn had hit them hard, and they'd been using their savings and taking out loans to maintain our lifestyle. My mother then delivered the news that would change everything. "Thomas has been accepted to Princeton. We're so proud of him." Her face glowed with pride before turning somber. "But he didn't receive any financial aid. The tuition, room, and board will be over $70,000 a year." I nodded, still not understanding what this had to do with me. Then my father cleared his throat and said the words that would haunt me for years. "We need you to leave Yale and transfer to State University. Just temporarily, of course. Maybe for a year or two until we get back on our feet." The room seemed to spin around me. Leave Yale. "But I have a full scholarship. It doesn't cost you anything for me to be there." "That's not entirely true," my mother countered. "There are expenses beyond tuition. Your housing during breaks, travel costs, books, spending money. And if you transfer to state, you can live at home and save us even more." I looked at Thomas, expecting him to protest, to say he would go to a less expensive school. But he sat silently examining his fingernails, as if this conversation had nothing to do with him. "This isn't fair," I said, my voice breaking. "I worked so hard for that scholarship. Yale is my dream." "Life isn't fair," my father said sharply. "This family has supported you for years. Now it's time for you to support the family. Thomas deserves his chance too." Over the next few days, the emotional manipulation intensified. My mother cried about how I was tearing the family apart with my selfishness. My father reminded me that family comes first, and implied that my resistance proved I didn't really love them. Thomas avoided me entirely, making me feel like I was the villain in this scenario. After a week of relentless pressure, I finally gave in. I called Yale's administration office and explained that I needed to withdraw due to family circumstances. The academic advisor I spoke with sounded concerned and offered to discuss options for maintaining my scholarship for when I returned. But deep down, I knew my parents had no intention of ever letting me go back. Saying goodbye to my friends and professors was excruciating. I couldn't bring myself to tell them the full truth, so I made vague references to family problems. My roommate hugged me tightly and made me promise to keep in touch. My favorite professor wrote me a letter of recommendation for my transfer application, telling me I was one of the most promising students she'd ever taught. As I packed up my dorm room, carefully placing my textbooks and Yale sweatshirt in boxes, I felt like I was packing away my dreams along with my belongings. The drive home with my parents was silent, the weight of what I had given up settling heavily on my chest. The transition to State University was jarring. Gone were the intimate seminar discussions and historic buildings. Instead, I found myself in crowded lecture halls where professors didn't know my name. I downplayed my Yale background, embarrassed by what felt like failure and not wanting to seem pretentious to my new classmates. Living at home again meant living under my parents' rules. I had a strict curfew and was expected to help with household chores while maintaining perfect grades. Additionally, I took a part-time job at a local coffee shop to contribute to family expenses. What this really meant was that my earnings went directly toward Thomas's spending money at Princeton. Every month, my mother would ask for my paycheck, explaining how Thomas needed new textbooks, or Princeton club fees, or funds for a study abroad opportunity. Meanwhile, I was buying my textbooks secondhand and had withdrawn from the State University study abroad program because we couldn't afford it. While I struggled, Thomas flourished at Princeton. His social media was filled with photos of fraternity parties, spring break trips, and networking events with alumni. My parents proudly displayed these pictures around our house and updated everyone on his accomplishments. When relatives asked about me, I was described simply as doing well at State, with no elaboration. The contrast between our experiences created a depression that followed me like a shadow. I lost weight, had trouble sleeping, and withdrew from socializing. My old Yale friends eventually stopped reaching out as I repeatedly declined their invitations, too ashamed to face them. My one source of light during this dark period was Professor Martinez, who taught advanced financial analysis. She noticed my exceptional understanding of the material and took me under her wing. During office hours, she would challenge me with complex problems and recommend additional readings. When I finally opened up to her about my situation, she didn't offer empty sympathy but practical advice. "You can't change what happened," she told me, "but you can use this time to develop skills that will make you unstoppable later." Under her guidance, I focused on developing expertise in financial modeling and investment strategies. I learned programming languages that weren't taught in our curriculum and created algorithms to analyze market trends. I built a small portfolio using the little money I could hide from my parents' demands, testing my investment theories in the real world. By my senior year, I had transformed my resentment into determination. I graduated summa cum laude with Professor Martinez encouraging me to apply to top financial firms despite my less prestigious degree. The job search was humbling. Recruiters who would have fought over a Yale graduate were lukewarm about my state university credentials. I had to settle for a position at a small investment firm instead of the prestigious companies that had recruited at Yale. My starting salary was modest, and the office was in a dated building rather than a gleaming skyscraper. Throughout this time, my parents continued to expect financial support for Thomas. After his Princeton graduation, they announced he would be taking a gap year to find himself in Europe. Somehow my paychecks were still needed to fund this journey of self-discovery. Thomas's attitude toward my sacrifice ranged from oblivious to entitled. When he visited home, he would casually mention exclusive restaurants he'd tried, or famous people he'd met, seemingly unaware of how these stories highlighted the disparity in our situations. Once, when I couldn't afford to join a family dinner at an expensive restaurant, he joked, "Maybe you should have studied harder in college if you wanted a better job." The irony was completely lost on him. Despite the obstacles, I was determined to build a life on my own terms. I moved out of my parents' house as soon as I could afford a tiny studio apartment, even though it meant eating ramen noodles for dinner most nights. The freedom was worth every sacrifice. At work, I applied the same determination that had gotten me into Yale. I arrived early, stayed late, and took on projects nobody else wanted. When the firm needed someone to learn a new financial analysis software, I volunteered and mastered it over a single weekend. When important clients called with emergencies, I was the one who answered regardless of the hour. Recognizing that my state university degree wouldn't open doors automatically, I built my professional network methodically. I attended industry conferences, joined financial technology forums, and earned additional certifications. I created a separate email account and phone number for professional contacts, ensuring my family couldn't interfere with my career. My expertise in algorithmic trading caught the attention of senior management. While my colleagues relied on traditional analysis methods, I developed programs that could identify market patterns more efficiently. Within 2 years, I had been promoted twice and was handling accounts 3 times larger than my peers. During this period, I deliberately limited contact with my family. I visited for major holidays, but kept conversations superficial. When they asked about my work, I was vague, knowing any financial success would be seen as a resource to be tapped for Thomas's benefit. I ignored their calls when I knew they would ask for money, and made excuses to leave early when visits became too stressful. The emotional distance gave me space to heal and build relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. I joined a book club where I met Jordan, a kind and supportive architect who valued my intelligence and ambition. Unlike my family, Jordan celebrated my accomplishments and encouraged my growth. I also formed close friendships with a diverse group of people who became my chosen family. There was Amir, a brilliant software engineer who collaborated with me on programming projects. Diana, a therapist, who helped me understand my family dynamics. And Leslie, a marketing executive who taught me how to advocate for myself professionally. None of them asked for anything in return for their friendship except authenticity and respect. After 3 years of limited contact with my parents and Thomas, I received an unexpected promotion to senior analyst. This came with a substantial salary increase and the freedom to develop my own investment strategies. My algorithm for identifying undervalued renewable energy companies proved particularly successful, earning significant returns for our clients and recognition for me within the industry. With my increased financial stability, I bought my first apartment without any family input or support. The day I signed the mortgage papers, I felt a surge of pride unlike anything I'd experienced before. This was mine, earned through my own efforts, despite everything that had been taken from me. As I arranged furniture in my new home and hung artwork on the walls, I realized I was creating more than a living space. I was building a life entirely of my own design, one where my value wasn't tied to what I could give others, but to who I chose to be. After nearly 4 years of minimal contact, I received a text from my mother inviting me to a family dinner to celebrate Thomas's graduation from Princeton and his acceptance to an MBA program at Harvard. I hesitated, but eventually agreed, curious about what had prompted this sudden desire to reconnect. The evening started pleasantly enough. My parents' home looked the same as always, perfectly maintained to impress the neighbors. My mother had prepared an elaborate meal, and my father opened an expensive bottle of wine. They asked about my job, nodding with seemingly genuine interest as I shared carefully edited highlights of my career. "We always knew you would be successful," my mother said, reaching across the table to pat my hand. "You were always so smart." Thomas talked at length about his Princeton experience and his plans for Harvard Business School. He had also developed an idea for a tech startup he wanted to launch after completing his MBA. As he described his vision, my parents beamed with pride. After dessert, as we moved to the living room for coffee, my father's tone changed. "Sophia, we wanted to talk to you about something important." The familiar phrase sent a chill down my spine. "Thomas's Harvard MBA will cost about $50,000, my father explained, "and he'll need capital for his startup around $350,000 to get it off the ground properly." My mother leaned forward. "We've done the calculations, and we need $500,000 total. With your job in finance, we know you must be doing well. We need you to contribute this amount to support Thomas's future." I sat in stunned silence, unable to believe what I was hearing. "It's really an investment in the family," Thomas added as if offering me a favor. "Once my company takes off, everyone will benefit." My father nodded. "After everything this family has done for you, it's time to give back. We sacrificed so much for your education." That statement broke through my shock. "What exactly did you sacrifice for my education?" I asked quietly. "Well, we raised you, supported you," my mother said, looking confused by the question. "My Yale education cost you nothing," I replied. "I had a full scholarship that covered everything. You forced me to give it up so you could pay for Thomas to go to Princeton." "That was a family decision," my father said dismissively. "And now it's time for another family decision," my mother added. "Your Aunt Susan was asking why you haven't helped Thomas more already. We told her you've been saving up to make a significant contribution." The realization that they had been discussing me with extended family, creating a narrative where I owed them, made my stomach turn. In that moment, I saw clearly how they viewed me not as a daughter, but as a resource to be mined for Thomas's benefit. As if reading my thoughts, my father added, "It's not like you're using your education properly anyway. That Yale scholarship was wasted when you couldn't even finish there." Those words struck me like a physical blow. The scholarship wasn't wasted. It was stolen from me. By them. And now they had the audacity to use it as a weapon against me. Without saying another word, I placed my coffee cup on the table, gathered my belongings, and walked out the door, ignoring their calls for me to come back and be reasonable. The drive back to my apartment was a blur. Once home, I collapsed on my couch, shaking with anger and hurt. I called Jordan, who came over immediately and held me while I sobbed through the whole story. "I can't believe they would ask that of you," Jordan said, "especially after what they already took from you." The next morning, I called in sick to work and made an emergency appointment with my therapist. Dr. Klein had been helping me work through my family issues for the past year, but this development required immediate attention. "What they're asking is outrageous," Dr. Klein confirmed after hearing about the dinner. "But it's consistent with the narcissistic family pattern we've discussed. They view you as an extension of themselves, not as an independent person with your own needs and goals." Over the next week, I researched narcissistic family dynamics, extensively reading books and articles that helped me understand the patterns I'd experienced my entire life. I wasn't crazy or selfish for feeling exploited. I was responding normally to abnormal treatment. As the shock wore off, my analytical mind began working on a response. Simply cutting ties might give me peace, but it wouldn't address the deep injustice of the situation. I wanted to do something that would not only set boundaries with my family but also help others in similar situations. I met with a financial advisor to discuss creating an educational fund for disadvantaged students. Using a portion of my savings, I established a scholarship specifically for students who had to leave prestigious universities due to family financial pressures. The scholarship would cover tuition, room, and board, and provide a stipend for expenses, ensuring recipients wouldn't face the same struggles I had. Next, I created a formal document itemizing everything I had sacrificed for my family. I calculated the difference in lifetime earnings between Yale and State University graduates in my field, added the money I had given them from my part-time jobs, and included interest on these amounts. I also documented the emotional costs, including the depression I experienced and the therapy expenses I had incurred. The total came to just over $500,000, ironically the exact amount they were now demanding from me. I showed these calculations to Jordan, who worried about my plan to confront my parents. "Are you sure this is healthy? Maybe you should just move on." "I need to do this," I explained. "Not just for my own closure, but for every kid whose parents prioritize one child over another. This isn't about revenge, it's about justice and truth." I gathered evidence of their manipulation: text messages asking for money, emails about Thomas's expenses, and recordings of conversations where they had promised to pay me back someday. I organized everything in a professional portfolio, the kind I would prepare for a major client presentation. As the day of confrontation approached, I felt a strange calm. For the first time, I would be facing my family not as the compliant daughter desperate for approval, but as a woman standing in her power and truth. I arranged to meet my parents at their house, insisting that Thomas be present as well. They agreed, probably assuming I was coming to discuss payment arrangements for their $500,000 demand. I arrived in my most professional outfit, carrying a leather portfolio containing all my documentation. My parents seemed taken aback by my formal appearance, having expected the apologetic daughter who usually showed up for family gatherings. "Before we begin," I said, taking a seat at the dining room table, "I want to respond to your request for $500,000. My father smiled, clearly misinterpreting my businesslike approach as agreement. "I'm glad you've come to your senses about your responsibility to this family. I've prepared some documents I'd like us to review together," I said, opening my portfolio and distributing copies of my calculations. "This is an accounting of what I've already contributed to this family, particularly to Thomas's education." As they looked over the papers, their expressions changed from confidence to confusion and then anger. "What is this?" my mother demanded. "This is a complete accounting of what my Yale education would have been worth to me in lifetime earnings, what I contributed from my part-time jobs during college, and the emotional costs of the depression I experienced after being forced to leave Yale." I kept my voice calm and professional. "As you can see, the total comes to approximately $500,000, exactly the amount you're now asking from me." Thomas looked up from the papers, shock evident on his face. "You had a full scholarship to Yale, and they made you leave so I could go to Princeton." He turned to our parents. "You told me Sophia chose to transfer to be closer to home." My father's face reddened. "This is ridiculous. You can't put a dollar value on family support." "Actually, you did exactly that when you decided my Yale education was worth sacrificing for Thomas's Princeton education," I replied. "And now you're doing it again with this $500,000 demand." I then pulled out another document. "I've established a scholarship fund for students who have been forced to leave prestigious universities due to family financial pressures. It's called the Second Chance Scholarship. Instead of giving you $500,000 for Thomas's MBA and startup, I'm committing that amount to helping students like me get the education they deserve." My mother gasped. "You would give money to strangers instead of your own brother." "I'm investing in breaking the cycle of family financial abuse," I corrected her. "And Thomas isn't entitled to my money any more than I was obligated to give up my education for his." Thomas, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. "I had no idea, Sophia. I swear. They never told me you had a full ride to Yale." He looked genuinely disturbed. All these years, I thought, I don't even know what I thought, but not this. I turned to him directly. Every time you posted about your Princeton parties and trips while I was working double shifts and taking out loans, you were benefiting from my sacrifice without even knowing it. That's what makes this whole situation so twisted. My father tried a different approach. We're your parents. You owe us respect and obedience. Respect is earned, I replied, and I no longer obey people who see me as an ATM rather than a daughter. I stood up, gathering my documents. If you want a relationship with me moving forward, these are my terms. Acknowledge what you took from me. Apologize sincerely and never ask me for money again. Until then, I'll be focusing on my own life and helping others through my scholarship program. The sense of power that flowed through me as I walked out their front door was indescribable. For the first time, I had stood up for myself without wavering or apologizing. I had named the injustice and refused to let it continue. In the weeks that followed, my parents made multiple attempts to reestablish control. They left tearful voicemails about family loyalty, sent manipulative emails about health scares, and even showed up at my apartment unannounced. Each time I maintained my boundaries, reiterating my terms for reconciliation. Thomas's response surprised me. After 2 weeks of silence, he sent me a lengthy email apologizing for his role in what happened, even if it was unwitting. He asked to meet for coffee, where he told me he had decided against Harvard Business School and was instead taking a job with a nonprofit organization focused on educational equity. I never questioned why I got everything and you didn't, he admitted. I was so focused on my own life that I didn't see what was happening to yours. I'm truly sorry, Sophia. While we haven't fully repaired our relationship, we're slowly building something new based on honesty and mutual respect. The Second Chance Scholarship has become my passion project. Beyond providing financial support, I personally mentor recipients, sharing the financial skills that helped me rebuild my life. Watching these students return to their dream schools and thrive gives me a satisfaction I never found in seeking my parents' approval. My own healing journey continues. There are still days when the old pain resurfaces, but they're becoming less frequent. Through therapy and the support of genuine relationships, I've learned that true family isn't defined by blood, but by respect, reciprocity, and love. Looking back, I realize that losing Yale ultimately led me to find myself. Without that painful experience, I might never have discovered my strength or developed the determination that now defines me. I've built a successful career, created a scholarship program that helps others, and surrounded myself with people who value me for who I am, not what I can give them. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd been allowed to stay at Yale. But I've come to understand that our deepest wounds often become our greatest gifts when we use them to create meaning and help others. By transforming my pain into purpose, I found something more valuable than any Ivy League degree: the power of defining my own worth. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between your dreams and your family's demands? How did you handle it? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they have the right to prioritize their own future. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to stand firmly in your truth.